In this video, we're reviewing wicked and getting all bubbly with a sweet and fizzy cocktail called the Galinda Fizz. Today on the Martini Shot. Hello and welcome to the Martini Shot, the home of movie reviews and movie-themed cocktails. Before we get into the review, let's whip ourselves up a drink. So this cocktail is inspired by Galinda, one of the prominent characters in the film, and like her, it is going to be pink, bubbly, and pretty sweet. This will take a little bit of prep ahead of time, but it's a relatively simple cocktail. And we can build it right in the glass. We're gonna be using a tall glass, such as a Collins. Let's go ahead and start with half an ounce of fresh lemon juice, half an ounce of peppermint schnapps, half an ounce of a raspberry liqueur, and then we're gonna do 1.5 ounces of bubblegum vodka. There may be a bubblegum vodka that's sold commercially, but it's a pretty simple recipe, so I went ahead and made my own. And with that, you're gonna be adding 1.5 ounces. And then from there, we can go ahead and top the drink up with soda water, leaving a little extra room for ice. And then from there, I thought a fun garnish would be to take a blow pop and coat it in sparkly pink luster dust or sanding sugar. Not only does it make for a fun garnish, kind of reminiscent of Galinda's wand, but you can also take that sugar-coated lollipop and stir it into the cocktail to give it a little bit more of a shimmery pink appearance. Then just throw some ice in there, and now you have a Galinda Fizz. The bubblegum is definitely the most prominent flavor here, but I don't think it's approached in a way that is really overpowering or kind of a sickly sweet flavor. You do get notes of that raspberry and a little bit of tartness from the lemon juice. And on the back end, you get that really nice cooling flavor of the peppermint schnapps. And despite a lot of the sugary ingredients, it's still very light, very bubbly, not super syrupy, which is, I think, something you need to worry about when dealing with flavor palettes like this. And bubblegum, truthfully, is a hard flavor to pair alongside some other things and make it appetizing. But I think this does a pretty good job. It's pretty approachable, very familiar, kind of just reminds you of like a day at the carnival. It's definitely unique and unlike anything you've probably had before, and it's pretty easy to make. Now that we have our drink, let's get right into the review. Musicals often feel like one of the most divisive film genres out there. The constant belting of your narrative and feelings through song can be seen as impassioned for some and grating for others. You know, I'm kind of in the middle there. Sometimes the only way to fully encapsulate the magnitude of the emotions and setting is through a grand musical number with aggressively detailed choreography. Films like La La Land, Chicago, and Moulin Rouge all succeed in this realm for me because everything feels appropriate and significant. But 2024 has not really captivated me with its musical offerings so far. Mean Girls didn't really nail the jump from stage to screen, and Amelia Perez's existence as a musical never really felt justified outside of an apparent need to be the most unique film of the year. So that brings us to Wicked, the adaptation of the acclaimed theater production, which I will say, out of the 3 musicals I've seen this year, I do think this is the best. But is it good? Wicked's success lies in its performances, from its lead stars to even its background roles tearing the dance floor up. Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande have the kind of enemies to friends chemistry that makes their journey quite entertaining to watch. When the musical moments hit, they can really hit, even though the whole soundtrack isn't a complete collection of bangers. But with all these positives, it's a shame that my biggest issues come from the film's presentation, from its questionable visual style to its thinly stretched narrative. I'll be the first to admit it isn't the emerald-coated train crash I might have been expecting, but I do feel confident that with all the visually expressive filmmaking out there, we do have the right to expect a little bit more. So Wicked tells the tale of the Wicked Witch of the West before she became a cackling, easily meltable villainess. She was once an outcast girl whose untapped magical powers earns her a seat at Shiz University. While there, she becomes unwilling roommates with spoiled airhead Galinda, who has great dreams of becoming a sorcerer. The two eventually form a budding friendship as Elphaba works her way to a meeting with the Great Wizard of Oz, while also becoming aware of a huge conspiracy that boils underneath the magical world. As I said before, the performances absolutely nail their roles, most obviously with Erivo and Grande. Erivo undeniably has one of the most powerful voices out there right now, which absolutely pays off as Elphaba rises from being reserved and understated to an undeniable force to be reckoned with. From an acting standpoint, Erivo does an admirable job, though I did find her characterization to be a tad underdeveloped. It's easy to want to see her succeed thanks to the cartoonish malice and leper-like reaction she receives, but I didn't feel anything deeper than that. Her wants and goals don't always feel entirely realized, while her inner turmoil over her perceived role in her mother's death never really comes to the forefront in how she acts or develops. You would think that a part 1 with a runtime that matches the entire length of the original stage production would give the film more time for character development, but really it just gives more room to dance around the idea. Sometimes a shorter amount of times is better because you have to get right to the point and not beat around the bush. Then there's Grande, who I admittedly had the most concerns about going into this. Sure, she can sing, but it's been a minute since I've seen her act. Luckily, the role of Galinda is the absolute perfect role for her. Bubbly and ditzy, yet possessing the volume for change, Grande shines through a character that could have been incredibly one note, but actually receives the most character development out of the two. I do think a little more could have been given, considering she eventually turns on and rejects her friend later down the line, which we'll see in a future movie. The rumblings of this are shown in the film's climax, but their severance ended up being purely physical, while I think there could have been a slight more of a dash of methodical thrown in to hint at what's to come. Even still, I was surprised to find Grande to be my favorite part of the film, from her rich girl obliviousness to her capacity to do good outside of appearance-based rewards. I said earlier that even these smaller performances help fill out the world, even though I mostly just meant the background actors who help bring the musical numbers to life, even if they do look like an assortment of 30-year-olds playing teenagers. The other supporting roles are a bit mixed. Some aren't really giving much, while others aren't really given anything to work with to begin with. Jonathan Bailey's Fierro had show stealer written all over him, but he isn't given a ton to do and disappears rather quickly without really revealing what he's all about. Michelle Yeoh and Jeff Goldblum, as much as I love them, are nothing to write home about. They do exactly what their characters demand of them and nothing greater. Yes, Goldblum talks and acts exactly how you'd expect him to. It's been talked about to death at this point, but yeah, the film's color palette is pretty muted and flat. It's not terrible to the point where it looks unrecognizable to the source material, but you would expect a film connected to one of the landmark films of Technicolor to burn a little bit brighter. Director John M. Chu stated that this was done to give the film more groundability and to make it more believable, which, one, more color doesn't disconnect us from this being a fully realized world, and two, why? Why would you be afraid to have a land filled with talking animals and cities of emerald come off as fantastical? When the film does commit to bolder colors, it kind of just ends up looking gaudy next to the rest of the world. It doesn't help that the film is lit so flatly, lacking in dramatic shadows to give it some depth. And the backlighting, my god, it looks like a warhead is detonating off in the distance in some scenes, particularly the dancing through time number. It was really distracting, often incredibly glaring to the point where it was hiding characters' facial expressions for no real reason. But what isn't an eyesore is a lot of the beautiful set design the film has to offer. Gorgeously constructed sets of stone and crystal look phenomenal, with some of them really tying into their musical sequences, like the revolving library in the aforementioned dancing through time scene. Most of the time, the presentation of these scenes are pretty serviceable with the choreography and blocking, though I did find how these scenes were presented to be occasionally boring, both from a directing and cinematography standpoint. This is the same director as In the Heights, a film I thought did a lot of creative things with how it utilized the city as a focal point of the film, and I didn't really feel all that much of that here. But John M. Chu isn't completely sauceless here, I just found him to be a bit lopsided. There's a moment of dancing between Elphaba and Galinda with no music that really moved me in its simplicity. It was the most I was moved by the whole film, which feels like an issue considering this is a play with Defying Gravity as the final song. That scene, though impressively performed by Arrivo, is so drowned in ugly CGI and messy presentation that those booming vocals didn't have the intended effect on me like they were probably anticipating. I don't know, these are things most people probably won't care about, but after getting spoiled with stuff like 2021's West Side Story, I know more can be done here in this visual medium. Wicked is bound to satisfy fans of the stage performance as it faithfully brings its charm and energy to the big screen. But if you're like me, someone who has only heard the soundtrack and wasn't all that pulled in by it, you may not be as electric for it. Thankfully, its leading ladies dominate their screen time despite a handful of elements working against them. It does feel very long and doesn't always manage to maintain its momentum, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't interested to see where this goes. Especially because theater heads have told me the back half of the play is the least interesting part, so I guess we'll see. But yeah, it's a fine enough film underneath modern trappings like poor lighting and so-so visuals that haunt me to no end, but families are still sure to like it. But can we just stop with the best picture predictions for it already? Recency bias is a hell of a drug. For my rating, I'm giving this film 3 broomsticks out of 5. Guys, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of The Martini Shot. If you saw Wicked, let me know what you thought about it down in the comments. And if you like what you saw here and would like to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow me across all social media channels. Those links are down in the description below. And if you enjoy movie reviews and movie-themed cocktails, be sure to check out my website, martinishot.blog. Until next time, thank you again for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Live deliciously, but please remember to drink responsibly.